Hi, my name is Moreen Wanjiko Kenaus, aka Shiko, aka Tatamo, or the lyricist. I'm so happy to be here. Just a simple girl who loves Jesus and whose life's purpose is just to inspire other people. And you are watching the Connect Life Stories. Welcome. Quite funny. I always say I stole the idea from my friend Heidi. I know you're watching this. It was 2017 was a very challenging year. A lot of the plans I had in the direction I thought my life was going, it kind of just unraveled completely. And so, I started back at zero completely. I feel like I always say I felt like God led me to the end of myself. Like, all the plans you had, they fall apart. And now it's like, okay, you have to figure out life again. The trajectory you had taken, maisha imekupiga character development. And so now you have to start again. And so one day when I was just sharing with my friend Daisy is when she mentioned, I've always wanted to go into psychology and I have a cousin in Australia. And I was like, it was quite, to be honest, it was plagiarism. I stole the idea. I went and I was like, Australia, where is that? And then I looked at it. And honestly, I was someone who was in biashara, so I never liked business, and I never thought that I would go back to pursue my master's. At that point, I had my undergrad, and I think it was just one of those things where we'd been praying through it with my mom, and she encouraged me, and she's like, just apply. If it comes, great, that's good. If not, we figure something else out. And so I guess that's how that journey started, So I got here, and first of all, I didn't know anyone here, like in Melbourne, in Australia. Like, it was completely like, Abraham being called, if you're a Christian, like God is like, go. And he's like, where? I'll show you. And then he just goes. And so that was me. The only thing I knew about Australia was just what I'd seen on National Geographic, and also from watching Banged Up Abroad. And, it's like, if you carry illegal things, you're going to be trapped at the airport. And so that's all I knew. But when I came here, fortunately enough, I think there are people who, I have a friend based here, and I really want to shout out Eva. If you're watching this, thank you so much. A friend of hers who was a mutual friend connected us, and she would check up on me once in a while. And so just figuring out like living situation, that took a couple of months before I was able to find a place I could call home. I stayed also with one of Eva's friends, who's also now my friend, called Koi, who was gracious enough to host me at her place for about 2 weeks while I figured out my living arrangements. And figuring out now, here I am in a studio. Well, they call it a studio, but like bed sitter, it's just a bed sitter, and you're starting life there. The bed, the door, that's the end of the house. And it was really just going to class, and first of all figuring out the bus schedule. Like, okay, there's this card I have to load with money, cool. And buses, they leave on time. It's not like Kenya where matatus stop everywhere. Like, you could be walking and they're like, sister, unaenda. But this one, there's nothing like that. And so had a few incidences where the bus driver left me staring me dead in the eye as he passed me on my way to this bus stop. But it was just very interesting, just trying to navigate and figure that out. But I think if I could summarize it in terms of like starting up life here, it was quite lonely. Like, you really don't know people that much. It's a whole new place. So the first word that comes to mind is lonely. I mean, exciting and scary, but like at the heart of it was a lot of loneliness. Yeah.
Wow. And what did that do to you as a person, coming from a very big family, siblings and everything, and here you've actually found yourself just on your own? What did that do to you?
Honestly, I spent a bit of time kind of trying to live life here. Like, you're physically here, but you're mentally trying to keep up with home. And of course, there's the time difference in making calls to family. I'd left also like at a very exciting time of family where our family was growing. Both my brothers were married with children, expecting other children, and really feeling like, you're missing out on them growing and experiencing all these new things. And at the same time, like, you're here in this new country and you're trying to figure out, like, did I make the right decision? And trying to understand, like, what is the end goal here? I think because of some of the challenges I'd encountered the year before, I was also still in a very fragile, I would say like mental and emotional space. Felt very guarded even in terms of like meeting new people. And so I feel like as humans, we either fight or there's the fight or flight response. I'll add a third one, which is like hide. Mine was hide. So I would hide. I would hide in the house. And it's not really hiding, but like you don't really go out of your way at that point. I would go to class. I had classmates that I met, and I still wasn't very open to making new friends at that time. So I just go back home and spend a lot of time alone with my thoughts. If I'm not talking to family, sometimes you call and people are busy with their day, and then it starts to hit you, oh, like life moves on when you're good, and it's hard to keep up with both things. And so you come to a point where you have to choose, okay, now I need to kind of like be present and figure out what does life in Melbourne mean, and what's the purpose of all of that. So that's kind of the point that I got to, yeah. And I would say like one of the key things that happened is, for me, I think I grew a lot in my faith in those times of being alone. Because I would say like for about 6 months, to be honest, I would spend, call it 90% of time just alone. And that was new. Like I feel like before lockdown was a thing, I was on a self-imposed lockdown, just alone with my thoughts. I felt like I didn't really know who I was, and I kind of wasn't very trusting of my own decision making because of the massive life change that had happened. And I kind of felt like I was having to like discover that once again. And for me, that faith in God, it was kind of like when I said I came to the end of myself, it was literally, okay, this is rock bottom. Now you have to figure out like what is the way out. So with schoolwork, you're like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I've been blessed to be able to come to this country. There's a lot of sacrifices that are being made. So you're wanting to be like higher distinction level in every one of your units. And I was like, that's the one thing I can give back to my family who are sacrificing everything for me to be here. So that was me, like books. And then I found a local church where I would spend time serving, like on Sundays. But even then, you're in the choir, and then after that, you run out before anyone can even get to know you, and you're back in your house hiding. And it's because I was really apprehensive, and I spent a lot of time praying and asking God to help me make friends and help me figure out how to get in the right company whilst I'm here, because I knew that as much as I didn't know much about life abroad, I knew that it's very easy for your life to take a very sharp downward trajectory depending on the kind of company you keep. And so I think that's why I took a lot of time getting to know myself, getting to understand, who I am, what are my values, why do I believe the things I believe? Like, okay, I'm a Christian, but why? Is it just because I grew up in that household? Do I really believe the things that I pray about? And so that took me a bit of time, and but slowly there was a point where things kind of started to shift. Yeah. One of the things I noticed was, one, I spent a lot of time just crying. I think I was really going through a lot. I can laugh now, but like I can relate, like being in a space where you kind of don't know where your life is going to go, and you feel very like, okay, what is the meaning of it all? Like, why am I here? Is it just to go through the system? That typical rat race. Okay, you go, go to school, finish school, graduate, find a job, hopefully find a husband, and then have children. And then that cycle is that. But then it's like, okay, if your life hasn't followed that plan, things have fallen apart, what happens then? And so I would spend a lot of time crying and listening to a lot of worship music, because I felt like that was the only thing I could relate to. Like, I didn't feel like I could really trust a lot of people just being in a new space. And I also didn't want to burden anyone with what I was going through at the time, anyone back home, because uko maju, like you're abroad, this is supposed to be the fun time. And like people, I don't know, I think there's a presumption that when people come abroad to study, some people still think that it's holiday. So you're being expected to be like, and in the era of social media, like if you're not on a yacht, you know, and you're not going out and doing all these things, then it's like, no, show us that. Like we want to see what that looks like. But then that's not reality. Like you're actually trying to figure out life. You're trying to figure out, okay, jobs, what does that look like? Friends, where do people go to meet people again? Like, and I didn't even realize how much of your networks are made for you as a circumstance of where you're born. Like that was one of the biggest culture shocks for me, or like realizations in that mental state, is that we are so predestined from where we grow up. Like your parents know people, you have neighbors, or the guys you start becoming friends with, the school you've grown up in. It's so easy making friends as a young person, like when you're younger and a child, because it's almost, they're made for you. Like you have your cousins, you have your siblings, you have all of those. But coming to a new place, it's now like, okay, hi, who are you? Tell me about yourself. And it's like now you are having to audition to make friendships. And if you don't know who you are, or you're not confident in who you are at that point, it's really hard to get out there. And so I was really struggling with a lot of self-confidence issues, and that was the main thing that was holding me back in going out there. I was like, oh, will people really accept me for who I am? You know, to be honest, at that time, before I got into the community, would not see a lot of Black people around, and not that you're discriminatory, but then like it's so much easier like to relate with someone, you know, you kind of come from similar backgrounds, but now you're in a multicultural place. You have to force yourself outside of the box to make new friends, and that was quite challenging. And I think it got to a point where now the loneliness was crippling, because you call back home and, you know, everyone is like, how is it? And because of how much they're sacrificing, you can't start saying, you know, how lonely and sad you're feeling. It's like, oh, it's great, thank you so much for all the stuff you're putting, you know, you've given up so that I can be here. And truly there were some nice things about it. Like I was fascinated by a lot of things, but then from a social side, it was just very, very hard. And like it just kind of made that insecurity a lot more the more I spent time alone. But I think I could say like there was a turning point where you just have to, like, a friend of mine says, you call yourself for a meeting. So najita mkutano and you're like, okay, what do you have control over in this situation, and what is out of your control? Everything in your control to change, you need to start changing those things. You can't determine the outcome, but nothing will ever change unless you do. Like, if I stay in the house, I can't talk about how lonely I am because I'm not doing anything to go out and meet new people. You know, if I'm saying that I'm very alone and I don't pick calls, I don't talk to people, I don't reach out even to my existing network of people, then nothing about that situation is going to change. And so I set a small challenge for myself, and I was like, okay, let me go on Facebook. Surely there are these groups that people form about like different places. So I got to a group called New to Melbourne. And I remember it was Easter break of 2018. And we had a 1 week break in school, and I was like, oh, you know, I just go to the bus station and back to school. Like, I don't really know beyond that suburb that I'm living in, like, what does life look like in Australia? And so I saw they had a day trip booked, and so I booked it. And I went, and we were in a line, and I didn't know anyone. It was a solo trip. I was like, yep, gonna go see what's there. It was to the Grampians, and so like it's this beautiful place with waterfalls, and me, I'm obsessed with water. Anyone who knows me, if you want to make me happy, if you want me to sign over my shamba to you, just take me where there's water. I'll be the happiest girl, and I'll do whatever you want. And yeah, and so we got to the city and we were gathered there, and I was actually excited for the first time in a long time because I was doing something different and something new. And so I remember all the people who'd come individually, we were all thrown in the back seat of the bus. And it was great because that was a great way to get to know those people. And we actually did hang out with them a couple more times, people from all kinds of backgrounds. And so I started to realize, so loneliness, while it's a very real thing, it's something that is changeable, just depending on the attitude that you take towards it.
Amazing. So what was really making you not make friends? Did you have an incident or something happened to you that you're actually afraid to make friends? Did you try making friends while you got here and something went sour?
I wouldn't say it was really like while I was here. But I would say, I guess it's just situations that had happened, just that led to me even wanting to come and study in the first place. Like I said, the certain trajectory my life was taking, and I thought things were good. And then I ended up, you know, not succeeding at those plans. And there were certain friendships that fell out at that point in time that kind of really made it very difficult. Like for me, I really struggled with like, how comes things went like that? And, you know, I felt like I lost out on a lot of people. While I still had and to date have my core support system of really great, amazing friends, I think at that point I felt a bit rejected. And so while I was coming here, that was kind of a mentality I had, right? And so, and then you get here and you become very aware of your I didn't know this was like, I didn't know I would feel this way, but you become so aware of the color of your skin just because that's all you're seeing, right? Like you walk into a bus and then like you've sat and there's a seat next to you. And there were incidences where I would find that people would rather stand than come and sit next to you. And so already that was reaffirming that feeling of, okay, it's a tough crowd. It's a tough crowd. And then like when you meet people and you're trying to tell them your stories, and I've realized like Kenyans, I love our sense of humor, but like not everyone fully gets it. So sometimes, you know, how we bond over like the experience of boarding school and how teachers would rough you up a bit and whatever. And like sometimes you tell someone from a different background that story and their first response is, I'm so sorry, are you okay? I just want to hug you. And I'm like, oh, it's not that deep. It's just... it's a funny story, and that's what we've all gone through. And so I think those are some of the hesitations, and a lot of it was just based in fear. But what I've come to see is that fear is it's a powerful emotion, but it's something that you should overcome, and it can stop you from living such a rich experience. Because imagine you're in a whole new continent, a whole new city, one of the most livable places in the world, but you're too scared like to go out and meet new people. Like, what a waste. You know, it's like, oh no, there's a bigger opportunity there than what you can see. So one of the interesting things that happened is that I was introduced actually again through this angel of a person called Eva to one person who is now one of my good friends here, who is Joyce, and we're actually in the same school, but we hadn't met in the 6 months that we'd been in school, like, you know, because we're doing different courses. So it took someone else from outside introducing us, and we were invited to this dinner gala thing, and we went, and that's how I met you as well. And you know, shortly after that, getting involved in the community, like we were planning, I think, was it like a Jamhuri dinner for the Kenyan community here. And actually that first gala dinner was the first place I was like, oh, there's actually a lot of Kenyans here and like a thriving community. But again, you know, it was a bit of a different crowd. I think Joyce and I were probably some of the youngest ones at that dinner. A lot of people were established with families, married. So again, the community is there, but you're also like, oh, I don't know how much I can relate to them at this point in time. And then shortly after that is when we started the Masi Masika practices. And today I just want to, even before I go into that part of my story, I just want to commend you, Pete, because we were in a meeting discussing the entertainment for this Jamhuri Gala dinner thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I love to sing. I can provide the entertainment if necessary. And then after the meeting concluded, when we were having a cup of tea, I think that's when, Pete, you mentioned the tour that Masi Masika was coming here. And you're like, oh, so if you can sing, you should definitely come and join us. And I was like, yeah. And we exchanged contacts. Mind you, Pete had never heard me sing at all. I could have been lying for all he knew, but somehow, for some reason, you took a chance. And the first practice, I didn't make it because like where I was living and where the practice was super far. So I missed the first bus and it was a Sunday. And like the next time I was gonna get there was like way after the practice lap. So I was like, can't make it. And the same thing happened the next week. And you kept calling me back until the third time I actually came for the practice. And I think that's where I really started connecting with people and forming that community of friendships, which is alive and well to date. Like, everyone from Uwezo Liberty Church, who I'm now a part of that team and like worshiping with them. But yeah, that was the first introduction to like young people who love Jesus, who are all about him and just love serving him, and very fun, energetic people. And of course, getting to do backup for Mercy, like what? I mean, that's any singer is just like, you get to work with some of the people you look up to and you love their music. It's a great thing. It was a great experience. And so going through that phase, like it was really good. But again, I think part of friendship is the need for vulnerability, right? And so like you get to know each other and it's like, oh yeah, so like where are you from? Like, how did you get here? Kind of like what we're doing here today. Like, how did you get here? What is that story about? And I think at some point, because I was still dealing with a lot of the emotional and spiritual challenges that I'd carried over even when coming here, it just felt a bit too much. Like I wasn't ready to be as open with people. And so I went through a really challenging time where, again, I was having to deal with these things because now you're with people. You have this community of friends. You need to be open and vulnerable and, just talking to them. But I was feeling a bit like challenged in the fact that like there was work that I was doing. And then it ended up like, stopping. Like I had to stop doing that work and then trying to find the next thing in my career and build that up. I was really struggling. And also school was getting very challenging. And I didn't feel like it was easy to I didn't feel like I still trusted people enough to open up about it. And so rather than having to explain, oh, what's up? You look down today. What's going on? It was just easier to just retreat and go back into my shell because I was like, oh, if these people really know how messy my life is right now, it's such a drag. Like nobody's going to want to be around that. And so I guess that's kind of where I went back into my shell. And like, sometimes when you're being confronted, it's like a transition period or like you're being forced to grow, personally grow. There are things about you that situations will trigger and now you have to choose to overcome. And sometimes you just don't have it in you to overcome. So it's easier to retreat and hide away rather than be forced to explain that or like feeling like you have to explain yourself to people and you're like, oh, is this information safe with this group of people? Like, will they understand what I'm going through or will it just be a thing where now you shared too much? I don't know if you've been in a situation where you've opened up yourself and you've shared a lot and then nobody has shared in return. And so you kind of feel like, ooh, this is a bit awkward, like as in I've exposed myself too much. And so I guess that's why I went back into that shell. And again, a lot of it really was nothing to do with the people. You see, these are all personal perceptions and things that I had to work through myself. And be at a place where I was confident in who I was, like, and really like myself and believe that people could like me for me, as in like, that me, Shiko, I am enough. And my stories and the dad jokes I like giving and the way I laugh, the things I'm interested in, like that's something that people want and not a different version of me that I feel I had to become before I could be vulnerable with people. Yeah. So I think when in terms of overcoming that season, a lot of it for me was honestly from a place of prayer. And I tell people, and I've even shared with my family as well, that Australia really was a God thing for me. Like it was not ever something that was on the books. Like I've said, I wasn't someone who come to a hustle or biashara. Like I wasn't someone who wanted to come back and do formal education again. And so like being here, it's like something had to end for God to push me out of my comfort zone and come into this new space where you're not defined by your background. Like none of that really matters. It's like, okay, from this point onwards, what is life going to be? And so a lot of it was in that place of prayer. As much as I say I spent a lot of time alone, one thing I will say about it is that it may sound, it was challenging, yes, but in retrospect, much of it did me good in terms of really getting to know myself, because I don't think the Shiko who's sitting here today and now, if I hadn't gone through that challenge of like needing to overcome those things, I wouldn't be as secure in God and in myself as I am today. And so one of the things that really helped was for me praying. And I prayed a lot. I really spent a lot of time, as I said, when I was overwhelmed alone in my room, I would read the Bible, I would listen to sermons, I would listen to worship music because I love to sing. I'm a singer. I connect a lot with God through music, and so I listen to a lot of that. To be fair, I also talked to my best friends back home a lot, and a lot of times spent a lot of time talking to family when I could. It's just that I was struggling to make that transition with people here, and just feeling safe enough to do that here. And so that really helped. But one of the things I'll also say that helped me, which was more of an external thing, was the fact that the people I'd met, and I really credit that, as I've said, yourself, the entire team at Uwezo, Joyce, these were people who checked up. Yes, I wouldn't necessarily pick all the calls, but there was still a persistence. Sometimes you just even see that text of someone cares about you, at some point you're like, but dude, why do you care? And it's not in a bad way, but it's kind of it kind of makes you curious. And at some point you're like, you know what? Nah, I'm not being fair. I'm going to have to start returning these calls. I'm going to have to start, maybe I'm not ready to talk, but I can send a text back. Hey, doing well. How are you? Slowly but surely coming out of that space and pushing myself even when I didn't feel like it. One of the other things that really helped me is starting to say yes to things like invites. And one of the places that really benefited me was going for fellowship at Kenaus. So that would happen every second Saturday of the month. And it was just this great place where, it didn't matter your denomination, we'd all gather as Christians, sing together. For me, loved singing. So getting to be able to sing together and pray and worship God. And then after, we would have this great, Kenyan home-cooked meal style food, and it's served well and everyone is so warm and welcoming. And so at that point I started realizing, yeah, you've been through some negative experiences, but it's not all bad. Open your eyes and see where God has placed you now, and that there's so many opportunities to get to know people, to get to interact with people who are genuine and warm and caring, people who don't know you from Adam, but they still are so warm and loving and inviting, and people who just kept pushing and hey, you want to go do this? Let's go. Hey, we're having this and this and this, let's go. I remember my first Christmas here, I'd attended church upon invitation from the group we're doing the concert with, and immediately after it was do you have somewhere to go? I was like, not really. They're like, come. And I went to pastor's house, and after that we went to the beach with all the youth, and it was so, I feel like that's kind of where that healing journey started as well, in terms of just coming to terms with the fact that, yes, sometimes you go through painful experiences, but the pain you've gone through doesn't define you. And you have to, friendship and love and life is all about risks, right? Some risks pay off, some don't. But often the things with the highest risks have the highest rewards. And for me, I'd say, moving to a whole continent where I knew nobody, huge risk. Do I think it's gotten a big reward? Hugest reward I could have, bigger than I would have ever dreamed of. I've come to know who I am, be confident in who I am. I've made a great community of friendships, and my faith has grown, and I feel anchored in Christ because that's where it all began. And so I would say that just open your mind to experiencing new people and new things, and learn that not everyone is the same. If you've been through bad experiences with friendships, with relationships, that doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life and how you live your life. That there's good people. Just believe in the goodness of God and the goodness of the people He's called. And also try and do new things. Nowadays, I think, again, I've come to be comfortable with being alone. which is different from loneliness. Loneliness is like you could be in a group of 100 people and still feel lonely. But like being alone in your own company is a great thing. Like nowadays I go, if I want to go see something new in the city, I go on the bus and I take myself. I have a good time. Honestly, guys, I'm great company, like just saying. And you get to really interact with yourself, but from a very positive mind space, because you've let go of all the hurt and all the pain and all the negativity, and now you're just embracing, what? I'm in Australia, like, dude, that's crazy, you know, like, who would have thought that I would be here? And I think also another thing that's helped is just find a community. Like when you start to say yes to things and meeting new people, slowly but surely, identify even if it's one person that you can start to be open and vulnerable with. Because that vulnerability will help you start to realize you're not the only one feeling those things. To date, I still have very vulnerable conversations with my friends about very difficult things that I'm going through. And sometimes you feel like it's just me, or maybe I'm weird for feeling this way. But then you talk to someone and they're like, oh, 2 years ago, I was dealing with that. Like, this is how I got out of it. And so you help each other and you help each other move out of that space. And so I'd say just don't be afraid of the unknown. Sometimes a lot of good can come from that. Like, just, be open to giving people a chance. And I think at the root of it, trust God. Like, for me, that's the anchor. Trust God, pray, 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 pray. I can't emphasize that enough. And I think slowly but surely, it's one step after the other. I think to summarize it all, I would say, don't feel the pressure of, okay, now I do not have to be lonely anymore. And then actually tomorrow you wake up and you're fine. Nah, it's like one day someone calls you and you say yes and you go and you have a good time. The next day, maybe you just don't have it in you, but it's okay. Don't beat yourself up for it. There's another day, like the sun will rise again and you're gonna pick up another one. You know, maybe another time you're like, you know what, even if maybe I haven't made that many friends, I'm going to go on a walk just to see what's beyond this route I normally take. Like, get on a bus, let me tell you. Even in the summer, like, it gets really hot here. And there's one time I didn't have working AC in where I was living. And so one time I was really hot. And I got on the bus because the bus has AC, and I just went wherever the bus was going, and I spent the whole day, and then I came back home. And that was fun. Like, it was silly, but it was fun, and I had a story to tell afterwards. And I was like, okay, this is really great. I think those are just some of the things. I mean, like, there's a whole laundry list, but I'd say get out of your comfort zone. You know, personally, I'm a person of faith. Pray about it. Seek God's direction. He'll lead you to those people. Say yes to things. Look it up. You know, we have social media. It's not all bad and pressure. Like, there's also good things that come from social media. Like that group that I found of New to Melbourne. I would never have gone on that trip. I would never have known where to start. Okay, Grampians. Where is that? That's where I first met a kangaroo. And it was nice. And I met so many different people and got to experience a new place. I'd say like there's so many different communities, like even here, like Kenaus, and even finding a church that you can be a part of and serve in. I myself serve in Uwezo Liberty, but there's other groups of like-minded people that if you just open yourself up just a little bit, one thing at a time, all you need is to meet one person. I met Eve, who connected me to Koi. And then somehow Eve connected me to Joyce, where I met Pete. And Pete connected me to everyone because he's the MP of Melbourne. And so sometimes it just takes like 1 or 2 or 3 people, and that community grows over time, and the love and the trust, it grows over time. And if you're in that dark space, like, you're gonna be okay. Like, it's not all bad. It's challenging because you're in a new environment, but there's so much good to come out on the other side of it. Just don't give up hope. Yeah. So currently, Maureen is working as a digital marketing manager with a startup called Amps Health. And that in itself has been a testimony. I think this walk in Australia has really been a walk of faith, and God showing me what He can do with ordinary, submitted people, because there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm just like anyone else. Probably have more weaknesses than most, you know. And that has been one of the places of like growth in. And that's why I say, like, looking back on that season, it was hard, but I really think it was like a refining season that God was taking me through and walking me through, because there's a lot of lies I believed about myself before, and that they needed to become undone. And as much as there was that, it felt like loneliness, but looking back now, I was never really alone. Like, God was always there with me the whole step of the way. And it taught me a lot about myself and how to value myself. And I think I've been able to apply that even in work environments, in going for jobs that, you know, you think some jobs are for some people, and like you, because of where you come from, you can't go into certain industries, and it's very hard to find work in your professional field of study. I'm living testimony that it's not. It may be challenging, but it is possible. And there are people who do not care about where you come from or the color of your skin. It's just about your talents and what you bring to the table. And you are so talented. So just believing in yourself and believing in God and applying. You know, if you don't apply for it, you're never going to get it. So just, that's one of the things that I've learned. Where I am now, emotionally, mentally, I'm happy. I am happy, content. I am strong. I'm no longer lonely. I have a great community, a great support system that keeps growing by the day. You know, this idea of no new friends does not apply. Like, you can be my friend if you want to, you know. And yeah, every day I think I learn a lot from the people around me, and I think it's easy for me now to be able to share with people the things that I've been through, the different experiences I've had, because it also took other people sharing with me to get me out of a really dark space, and just being patient with me as well. And so, yeah, I'm in a great place. I'm really thankful to God, to my family, to my friends, both here and back in Kenya. Special shout out to my best friend, Yasha. Hi. Yeah, just people I can pray with and serve God with. Like, God really answered my prayer when I asked for a godly community. It was a rough and rocky road, but we got there. We got there eventually, and so I'm so grateful and thankful. Yeah. I'd say my final words of encouragement is that it gets better. That's one thing I will say. Like, to summarize everything is that it gets better. And yes, it'll feel a bit tough to begin with, or maybe even in the middle. Maybe you came and things were great, and then something happened to you here and you feel like you're really struggling with it. But I would say, don't give up. Like, there is so much to live for. There's so much to be hopeful for. Even if you prefer your own company, just try and push yourself. At least give yourself a monthly challenge of like, once a month, I'm gonna go do something new or meet new people. And a great place to start would be like with the Kenaus Fellowship, for example. Come, even if you're coming for the food, come. Someone who's serving you food might smile at you, and you'll be like, okay, there's goodness in the world, and it'll restore your hope. And yeah, I'd say just keep trusting God. In God's hands, you are never going to be alone. You're alone, but never lonely. You may feel like you're alone, but God is always with you, and He has a really good plan for you. I've seen it come to pass, and it's still unfolding in my life, and I know it will happen in yours as well.